Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We're starting this deep dive today by tackling 6 critical sources. And the common thread running through them all is this clash between institutional intent and, well, real-world failure.
Right.
How does the government intend to regulate the environment or share tax revenue or protect workers versus what actually happens on the ground?
Exactly. We're looking at everything from the complex math of federal funding and the intense pressure on quick commerce workers.
All the way to a massive preventable public health crisis and the high-stakes future of India's space program.
And our focus is really on moving past the headlines and into the architecture of governance itself. Whether we're discussing constitutional finance or ecological mandates, we're looking for that underlying tension. Is the institution absent when it's needed most? Or is it overstepping its foundational role in creating instability?
And that's what impacts you, the citizen, and the environment we all share.
Okay, let's start with the money. Specifically, this intense debate around how the central government shares tax revenue with the states. This is all managed by the finance commissions, or FCs.
Right. And the core concern for states, particularly the ones that generate a lot of revenue, like Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, is a perceived erosion of their fiscal autonomy, especially post-GST. They're worried about the reliance on non-shared cesses and surcharges, and they're seeing their own tax shares decline.
This is where we run straight into that classic conflict we hear every few years, collection versus contribution.
Explain that a bit.
Well, states that feel they contribute heavily, particularly in direct taxes, feel shortchanged. The problem is that the standard method for calculating this relies on registered office locations. PAN data.
Which is inherently flawed.
It's deeply flawed. The underlying economic activity doesn't always happen where the tax payment is officially recorded.
That's the classic example, right? An automobile manufacturer in Tamil Nadu sells vehicles across the whole country.
Exactly. The taxes get booked in Tamil Nadu, but the economic consumption, the real activity generating that tax, is nationwide. So the PAN data fails to capture the true state-wise contributions.
Especially with multi-state firms and so much labor migration.
Precisely. We desperately need a more reliable proxy to estimate how central taxes actually accrue at the state level.
And this is where GSDP comes in.
Yes, gross state domestic product. Even though the center levies the direct taxes, GSDP represents the actual underlying tax base and income generation within each state's borders. And the empirical evidence for using it's remarkably persuasive.
I found the data points here fascinating. The correlation between a state's GSDP and its direct tax collections is 0.75. That's a really strong link.
It is. But then you look at GST collections, which are designed to capture consumption across state borders.
And the correlation with GSDP leaps to 0.91.
0.91. It's an incredibly strong relationship. It really suggests GSDP is a far more meaningful indicator of where revenue is actually generated.
So if we connect this to policy, the current 15th FC's devolution shares show a near-perfect correlation, 0.99, with actual transfers.
Right. The formula works as intended in that sense.
But when you check how those same transfers correlate with actual tax collection shares,
And it's a very weak 0.24.
which shows the formula is clearly not reflecting contribution.
Not at all. GSDP, on the other hand, correlates highly at 0.81 with tax collections.
But hold on. If we adopt GSDP, wouldn't that just make richer states richer? I mean, if transfers were based on GSDP, states like Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu would get the largest gains.
They absolutely would. And conversely, states with high populations but lower GSDP, like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, they would see the largest reductions.
So what's the argument for it then?
The core argument is that giving GSDP a higher weight improves the perceived fairness and credibility of the entire system. It's an attempt to better balance efficiency-rewarding economic contribution while still preserving other mechanisms for equity and redistribution. It's about finding that balance.
That search for stability in policy formulas is a great transition to our next topic. We're looking at another powerful institution facing implementation failures, the Supreme Court, specifically in environmental cases.
Right. We're seeing this trend where the court moves beyond just reviewing administrative legality and starts issuing these managerial future-looking directions.
And this happens when the designated regulators fail, doesn't it?
It does. It effectively pulls the court into a substitute role. Some people call it judicial governance.
And the problem is the instability this creates, these regulatory U-turns.
Exactly. Think about the eco-sensitive zone, or ESZ, rules. In June 2022, The court laid down a sweeping blanket 1-kilometer protection zone around every protected area.
A blanket rule that almost immediately proved unworkable. States argued it was just too hard to implement on the ground.
And less than a year later, by April 2023, the court had to modify its own order.
We saw the same thing with the diesel vehicle ban in Delhi NCR back in 2015.
The blanket ban was lifted by 2016 and replaced with a nominal 1 or 2% compensation charge. Then the action was narrowed even further. The court's justification seems to shift from, doctrinal legality,
Like saying ex post facto environmental clearances are illegal.
to simply managing the commercial and administrative consequences. It becomes about damage control.
And this creates a huge systemic problem. When the court gets involved early in an approval process, especially through something called a continuing mandamus.
That's when it basically appoints itself the project manager.
Right.
A continuing mandamus means the court stays in charge, overriding the regular review processes. This confers a sense of finality that can discourage any meaningful judicial review in other forums. It shapes who gets heard and on what basis.
So the court is accidentally creating instability. The real task is for it to discipline the state back into functioning regulation, not to become the regulator itself.
That's the key. Set clear thresholds, insist on time-bound action, but retain its power to review.
This theme of regulatory instability is a perfect bridge to the gig economy. We've moved from instability in policy and environmental law to intense economic instability affecting over a lack of gig workers.
Yeah, workers who recently went on strike.
And their entire demand is framed by the withdrawal of the dangerous 10 to 20-minute delivery system, citing severe safety concerns.
The critique, articulated by voices like Burshon Kamal, is that the 10-minute delivery promise is pure industry competition. It's not a consumer necessity.
And the speed, he notes, is extracted from real people.
People who are kept under these unstable pay structures with the constant threat of having their ID blocked by an algorithm. The platforms control everything: pricing, assignments, ratings. So they must carry obligations like minimum earnings, accident insurance, and pensions.
The control is absolute, but the responsibility is non-existent.
That's the core of it.
But there is a strong economic counterpoint here from people like Kamal Karanth. Well, quick commerce is booming. It's projected to hit 1.5 lakh crore soon. And crucially, it fulfills a massive employment gap for low-skilled workers in India.
A country struggling to create jobs.
Exactly. We only create about 2 million jobs annually for 20 million new entrants. So the question becomes, is some job better than no job? And would regulating it like full-time work just kill the model?
That is the central policy challenge. And when we look at the regulatory reality, the labor codes, they're highly insufficient, vague.
They authorize welfare, but they don't make it mandatory.
Not mandatory, not immediately enforceable. And most critically, they explicitly exclude gig workers from being classified as employees.
Which means they miss out on fundamental rights, minimum wages, regulated hours, collective bargaining.
All of it. And for the workers, the core issue is that algorithmic control we mentioned. The system runs on these black boxes that control everything,
creating acute income instability with absolutely no clear mechanism for grievance redressal.
None. It's jarring to realize how much of our convenience relies on systems that are deliberately opaque about the human cost.
And the future prognosis is grim if the rules don't change.
It is. As Kamal projects, AI will only bring more control and less voice, making workers even more disposable. Tomorrow, AI will decide who loses their income faster, cheaper, and at a larger scale.
Let's shift gears entirely to a major public health issue that is really a failure of national awareness: Spina Bifida.
It starts with this heartbreaking story of a young mother whose 7-month-old child had an unknown paralysis.
And the doctors couldn't even explain the condition clearly. But Spina Bifida is actually the most common birth defect in India.
That's right. It's a birth defect of the spinal cord that causes serious childhood paralysis. It affects over 25,000 children in India every year.
Which gives us one of the highest rates globally, about 4 per 1,000 births.
It results in physical disabilities like paralysis, hydrocephalus, incontinence. But the crucial point, which is so often missed, is that there is no intellectual impairment.
None at all.
These children have the capacity to lead independent, productive lives if they can get timely care.
And the reason this is so tragic is that it's largely preventable, over 70% of cases.
Preventable by the simple, inexpensive preconceptional intake of folic acid. This has been a proven medical fact since 1991.
Since the MRC vitamin study.
This failure to act, it really amounts to gross public health negligence. 68 other countries mandate food fortification with folic acid, and they've reduced their rates to below 1 per 1,000 births.
And India, 30 years after the solution was proven, has made no meaningful national effort.
No awareness campaigns, no mandatory fortification.
The economic justification for you, the listener, couldn't be stronger. Prevention is highly cost-effective.
The analysis shows that every single rupee spent on prevention saves well over 100 rupees that would otherwise be needed for treatment, surgery, and long-term rehabilitation.
So what's being done now?
Well, research is underway for India-specific solutions, like fortifying widely consumed things like salt and tea with folate and vitamin B12.
But the immediate, non-negotiable step
Is a national awareness campaign to ensure every woman in the country knows about this simple preventative folic acid solution. This is a clear case where institutional absence is costing thousands of lives.
Moving from a public health crisis to a giant of conservation, we turn now to pay tribute to the late Madhav Gadgil.
A truly pioneering scholar, an iconic people's conservationist.
And his work perfectly encapsulates that tension between institutional intent and grassroots needs.
Gadgil's life represents a profound evolution of ecological thought. He actually started with the classic urban conservationist approach.
Believing protection meant establishing parks and removing human habitation.
Right. But in the 1980s, he fundamentally shifted to working with the common people of India. He saw them not as a threat, but as essential constituents of the ecosystem, the true guardians.
And this philosophical shift led to his sharp, often controversial critique of existing policy.
He saw the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 not as a protective measure, but as a weapon.
A weapon used by forest departments to subjugate marginalized communities, hunter-gatherers, farmers, by criminalizing their traditional ways of life.
And this people-centric philosophy was the driving force behind his most famous and most contentious work.
Yeah.
The 2011 Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel Report, the WGEP report.
The challenge was monumental. Saving that fragile ecosystem from industrialization, climate change, and commercial greed.
And his recommendations were stringent, designed to put local populations in charge. He called for strict, people-driven protection.
Setting up the Western Ghats Ecology Authority, declaring major parts as highly sensitive zones, ESCs 1, 2, and 3.
And crucially, banning new polluting industries, major mining, and large-scale hydro projects in the most endangered zones.
The political fallout was immediate and fierce, wasn't it?
It was. Vested interests resisted, which led to the formation of the subsequent Castarangan panel.
Which recommended protecting a dramatically reduced area, just 37% of the Ghats.
And even that reduced recommendation failed to be accepted. It just shows how difficult it is to implement scientific, people-driven policy against commercial interests. The Ghats remain a zone of contestation.
But his institutional legacy is massive beyond just that report.
Oh, absolutely. He established the Center for Ecological Science in ISC. He authored the concept for the Nilgiris Biosphere Reserve,
which became India's first UNESCO MAB reserve.
And his work directly influenced state-level governance. For instance, it sealed the fate of the Atharapalli Idol project in Kerala.
His ultimate philosophy was that the ecologist must talk of many things, not just air and water,
but of men and money and economic reforms. His lasting legacy is promoting that all-inclusive, people-centric nature conservation model.
For our final deep dive, let's look skyward and discuss ISRO. Its recent record PSLV reliability, Chandrayaan-3, Aditya L1, it's been remarkable.
It has, but that success also dramatically raises the bar for what's expected next.
And that brings challenges. The first major one seems to be capacity and prioritization.
For sure. ISRO is juggling 3 huge initiatives at once. Human spaceflight with Gaganyaan, complex science missions like Chandrayaan-4, and developing the powerful next-generation launch vehicle, the NGLV.
That simultaneous push creates a bottleneck, doesn't it?
A huge one. It's evident in the low projected launch cadence for 2025. Only 5 missions against an initial projection of 8.
Okay, so capacity is one thing. The second challenge is structural governance.
Right. The 2020 liberalization reforms created in-space for authorization and NSIL for commercialization. And that looks clear on paper.
But India still lacks a comprehensive national space law.
And the consequence of that, for you, the listener, is that without a law, ISRO is constantly pulled in as the default regulator.
The default regulator and technical certifier for every single operation. Legal allocations of liability, insurance, it's all unclear for private players.
Which not only burdens ISRO, but also slows down the growth of the private ecosystem. So ISRO needs to be insulated from those routine tasks. The third challenge is competitiveness. The global space sector is moving fast toward reusable launch vehicles.
Which is what the NGLV is designed for. Reusability and a high payload up to 30 tons to low Earth orbit.
Achieving that target requires massive production depth, advanced manufacturing, and significant sustained capital investment.
And we saw a worrying sign there, didn't we? Investment in the private space sector fell sharply in 2024.
We did. The next phase really depends less on individual laudable feats and far more on sustained industrial performance across the entire ecosystem.
The bottom line is that the Indian space program has to transition from executing a series of impressive missions to becoming a mature, resilient industrial system.
Where engineering, regulation, manufacturing, and finance all mature together.
We have covered so much ground today. From the complex math of federal fairness via GSDP and the urgent need for transparency in the gig economy,
to the shocking simple prevention of Spina Bifida and the necessary structural reform of ISRO.
And across these topics, judicial intervention, ISRO's bottlenecks, public health failures, lack of worker protection, we keep circling back to one central issue. In a rapidly evolving modern state, is it more damaging for an institution to be entirely absent when it's needed, or to overstep its foundational role and create instability?
How do we best enable governance that supports rather than stifles both innovation and human safety? That's the provocative thought we'll leave you with.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.